what's up everyone, it's Emily and welcome back to my channel. It is October 1st, everyone. First of all, it's my favorite month of the year. It's spooky month, Halloween, everything. I am just so excited for everything that's in store for this month, but also it is the first day of Preptober, and if you don't know what that is, it means we are going to spend the rest of this month prepping for Nanowrimo, which is National Novel Writing Month. I am going to be here to help. I'm going to provide you with some resources to maybe help you get started if you are planning on writing a novel in November. For me, I want to be as successful as possible in the 30 days in November, or whatever. I want to be as successful as possible in November when it comes to writing my book, and I want to help provide those resources to others because I think that being prepared is the best way to get on the road to success. And I want everyone to be as successful as they can be during that month. So in today's video, I will be sharing with you a few ways that you can set yourself up for success with your novel. Over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be making a couple of videos to help you figure out plot, character, world building, outlining, all of those things that help us prepare to write a novel in as little time as possible, so that we can spend less time making things up as we go along in November and more time writing the story. And just as a reminder, this is just to help you get prepared and excited to write your novel. If you don't make the 50,000 words in November, that's okay. You are not a failure. You didn't do anything wrong. If you surpass that goal, that's also great and wonderful. And if you aren't even planning on writing a novel and you just want to finish a book that you've already started, that is also an excellent goal to keep. Hopefully, some things that I share with you will maybe get some inspiration going or help you along if you're feeling stuck in your own story. The first thing that you need when you're writing a book is an idea, whether that's a sentence that comes to you when you're out on a walk, or a character that you've been building in your mind for years and years, or maybe it is a place that you have found, a civilization that you've created in your mind, a world that is different from our own that you want to put on the page, but maybe you don't have the characters yet to flesh that out. The idea is the thing that ignites the spark in you to create this story. An idea, however, is not going to create a full-blown novel. A mistake that I made is I started writing a book with just an idea, and after about 10,000 words, I realized I had no idea what I was doing or where my book was going or what a plot structure was in that sense. And oftentimes books that are formed in this way can kind of become really slow-paced and windy, and to a reader not really make much sense, because in the author's head everything is clear because you know what it's supposed to be, but when the story isn't moving anywhere because it's just a character in a place but not really with anything going on, the reader might get bored or just not really have any idea what's going on. And this can be a really great short story if you're someone who loves short stories and you don't want that full in-depth plot with subplots or things that are going to take 80 to 100,000 words to write. Those are also really great, and I love writing short stories, but if you want to write a novel, you need a little bit more than just an idea or a character or a place to really get everything going to get you to that 40, 50, 60,000 word book. The second thing you need, if you haven't already had this idea, is a really good character. Now, your main character is probably going to go through the most growth in your novel. It's not a rule, but it's definitely up there that your main character is going to go through a huge change through the course of your story. Once you have a character in mind, the next thing to do is to start asking yourself questions like, what is their main objective? What is the one thing that they want more than anything in the world? Whether that's love or peace or to find a home. They should have an intrinsic goal within themselves that keeps them moving forward, as well as a goal within the story, but hopefully those two things kind of line up by the end. The next thing you want to think about is what is stopping them from achieving that goal? Is it themselves? Is it the world that they live in? Is it another character? It could be anything, but they need something that's stopping them from reaching the end goal that they've set up for themselves. And it doesn't need to be something that they know that they want. It can be something that is just inside that is feeding them, even if the character can't put it into words themselves. The next thing you want to think about are strengths and weaknesses, because every character will have a strength and every character will have something that is about them that is not super great. Whether it's stubbornness, cockiness, arrogance, not being a team player, not being a leader when everyone needs a leader. It can be anything, but a character should have both things, because if someone is all strength and no weakness, well, then what's stopping them from getting their goal? And the last thing you really want to think about is what changes does this character go through by the end of the book? What about them has changed, or what goal have they achieved, and how does that affect them as a person? If their goal is power and they get power at the end of the book, is the world more in balance? Are they happy? Is it not what they thought it would be? Have they grown into this leadership role through the course of the book? Or have they, through the course of the book, realized that being in power is not what they thought it was? How does this person change? And then if you want to go the extra mile, you can also think about the things like, what do they like? What do they dislike? What relationships do they have in their life? What relationship do they have to the world? Do they have a job in the world? Do they have siblings? What are their parents like? Do they even have parents? What does the average day look like for them? Are they a really important business person? Are they a scientist? Like, what does the day look like for them on an average day? And just really let yourself get to know this character. And it's a really good rule of thumb that for maybe your like main group of characters, to really understand what that looks like for them. And that will help you have a little bit more wiggle room and playroom when developing your character and making them interesting within their relationships and within themselves. The next thing to think about is the world in which your book takes place. Whether it's in reality or fantasy or in space, you're creating a new world for these characters to be in, and there have to be rules and guidelines to this world. And that is how your readers are going to believe in it, even if it's fantasy. Because even in the most magical of fictional worlds, there are rules to how that world works, and your characters need to stay within those rules. And that will help the reader suspend their disbelief to go along with the story, even if it's different from our world. This is also the fun part where you can talk about culture, religion, history. Does religion even exist in this world? What is that like? What kind of jobs are present in this world? How do the people react to the environment? What is the power system like? Is there a government? What does the government do? If there's magic, what is that like? Is it only for the elites? Is it something that everyone possesses? Is it a soft or a hard magic system? Are there rules to the magic? What does that all do to combine into this unique world that you create? And then, like, how does your character fit into that world? Are they just your average person in this world, or are they someone that kind of sticks out a bit? An example that first came to mind for me was in 1984 by George Orwell. We have this dystopian society that exists in which the government controls everything, and our main character, Winston, is not like everyone else. While the government is throwing propaganda left and right at everyone, he knows that this is not the truth. He has his own objective and ideas outside of the world that has been laid out in front of him, and that's what makes him different. So once you have these basic things all put together and you kind of understand the world and characters that we're going to be creating this story around, it's time to start thinking about plot. Because even with the most interesting world and perfect characters, if the story isn't going anywhere, we've just created this amazing world. But then we need to figure out how we're going to get your character and your story from point A to point B. So to talk about this section, I'm going to give you a basic plot structure by using Freytex pyramid and the 3-plot structure. And I'm going to break that down for you so you can kind of understand how a plot works. I do want to note though that this is a very Western idea of creating plot, and not every book needs to follow this sort of layout. There are plenty of books in other cultures and stories laid out in different ways, and your book does not need to necessarily follow this structure. However, I think you'll realize that most commonly books that are being published by big houses follow this kind of structure, and that is why I'm going to focus on it. Feel free to play within this structure, or if you know of other ways to plot your book, I highly recommend just doing what feels right for you. But for people who maybe need a little bit more structure in framing their story and the arc of their characters, this is a really good way to start out, especially because there are so many resources for it. But I just wanted to say this is not the only way to plot your book. This is just a basic plot structure fitted particularly in Western media. I hope that makes sense. So how does plot work? We have our basic structure, and for this I'm going to use Freytex pyramid, which looks like this. I will put it somewhere here. And his pyramid consists of stasis, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution / new stasis. To break that down, let's talk about stasis. Stasis is the beginning of it all, the normal day in which your story begins. So in the Hunger Games, this would be the morning of the reaping, in which Katniss is hanging out with Gale, doing her hair for the reaping, seeing her mom, talking to Prim, all of that good stuff. We kind of see what the world of Panem is like. This is going to give us all of the exposition we need for the world. We learn about the capital, the way that the districts are made up, and that District 12 is the poorest district. We get to see what kind of life these people are living before anything happens to our main character. Overall, this is what the everyday looks like. And that brings us all the way to the inciting incident. And this is when things start to change. This is the thing that makes today not like every day. This is the thing that takes our main character and forces them into action in some way. Sticking with the Hunger Games example, this would be when Primrose's name is called during the reaping, which forces Katniss to volunteer herself in her sister's place to save her from being a tribute of District 12. This is the exact moment that changes the course of Katniss's life through this book. If Prim's name had not been called out, Katniss probably would not have volunteered herself, and she would have just stayed a member of District 12, living her life the way she did before. But because this happened, everything else in the book happens. Next, we move to rising action. This is that kind of part in the pyramid where we're just going more and more and more towards a climax. This is where all of the stuff in the middle happens, where we build relationships, we learn more about the world, we are fighting demons in between, and all of this is propelling us forward towards the climax. The climax is the moment of the most tension. This is the no turning back point. This is the point where something has to give. Something is going to change the world because of this thing. This can be a battle, a fight between friends, this can be in a romance. You know, I feel like this always ends up being the miscommunication trope, but this is the moment where like things are going to happen, someone's gonna die, or someone is gonna be heartbroken. This is just the moment where there is no turning back. In the Hunger Games, again, this would be the Barry moment, where if they go through with it, nothing is gonna be the same. Next, we have falling action. This is after the climax where we kind of see how the world has shifted because of this. If we were watching a movie, this would be the moment after the battle where the camera zooms out and we get to see all of the people who have fallen during this war or the battle or whatever. We get to see the consequences of everything that has happened up until this point. But at this point, the conflict more or less has resolved and we're kind of tying our ends together. And then we have our return to stasis. And that is the ending of the book. It is showing us the new normal of this world, basically where we would start again if we were to have a sequel. In a romance book, this would be your happily ever after, or maybe if they break up at the end, this would be the new normal of heartbreak. A lot of authors will write this as an epilogue in their book, as kind of an ending in the future to kind of see how the world has changed. And if the book is a series, sometimes this is a cliffhanger that just leads us right into the next book. But either way, the world has changed for better or for worse. So taking Freytex pyramid, we can also turn this into the 3-act structure, which I think is pretty much how most, not all, books, especially in like YA, fantasy, that's how these are all pretty much categorized. It's basically Freytex pyramid, but we split it up even more, and it kind of breaks down more plot points for your character to go through. Act 1 is the setup. It's our exposition or stasis, the inciting incident, and the first plot point. The first plot point is the thing that takes us right into Act 2. So something goes wrong and thrusts the characters into more action. For example, in The Wizard of Oz, the Act 1 plot point would be when Dorothy's house lands on the Wicked Witch of the East. You get to see Dorothy's life on the farm in Kansas. The tornado comes in as our inciting incident, and the last moment before we enter Act 2 is her waking up in Oz and seeing just what has occurred. Act 2 is called confrontation. This is when we have rising action, the midpoint, and the second plot point. Rising action I kind of just talked about in the Freytex pyramid, but this is definitely where things are getting heated up. This part is also where all of the fun world building and character development happens. A lot of authors like to use this as like the playground. Like, we've built this world, we have these characters, and now it's time to just explore and use that to also further us forward in one way or another. The midpoint is often a setback for the main character. So they try something and they fail pretty big. This is normally where they have to find a new strategy to get to the end. So someone dies. It should really set them back, but it can't let them give up completely. This is definitely a time for reflection. So if I go back to my Hunger Games example, Katniss losing Rue is her midpoint. This is the one where she is feeling utterly defeated and needs to rethink how she's going to get out of the Hunger Games. And then that also brings us into our second big plot point, which brings us into the third act. And that has to be our turning point, where they are going forward, they have figured out what they're going to do to move forward, and something else happens. So some other rising action happens within your story to propel you forward again. Then Act 3 is our resolution. So we have the pre-climax, the climax, and then the resolution. Now the pre-climax should be the biggest setback yet. This should be the we are going to die moment before the climax. So this could be a betrayal by one of the best friends of the main character. It could be that the enemy is way stronger than we ever thought it could be, or that the weapon that we've been building this entire time doesn't work. This should be the moment where the character feels the lowest. It is the turning point. It is the we are so screwed, we are going to die. And normally this happens around the 80% point of the book. So we are almost to the end. This is the do or die. We are heading into the final battle. And then obviously the climax is that moment where it is do or die. Hopefully your main character wins somehow. And then we have the falling action into the return to stasis, where we have our new normal and everything is resolved more or less in this new world that's been created. The nice thing about using this kind of structure is it really keeps the plot moving forward. So especially if you're someone who has trouble with pacing, this is something that keeps your characters motivated to get to the next point. And if you're someone like me who has a hard time with outlining and finding the through line of the story, this is a great way to keep yourself on track while you're writing. It also ensures that each scene you write is moving the plot forward and is done with intention. We maybe have a little bit less filler in between these really important scenes, because we can always go back and add more relationship building and stuff towards the end, but you really need that good plot structure to keep you moving and to keep your characters fighting through the whole story. And this is the kind of plot structure that I use to help me outline my book. So I have where my character is starting, the setbacks that is going to keep them falling backwards, because that's what makes a story interesting, is to have your character fighting even though everything is pushing them back. So when you know what those things are, you can then play around within that structure to make it interesting and in your own way. This is actually what happened to me when I tried to write my first book, is that I was a pantser, which means you're someone who doesn't plot, you just start writing what comes to your mind. Is that I was writing and I had no idea where my story was going to end up. I didn't know what kind of development my characters were going to go through. I didn't have any setbacks written into my story. So then when I was at the 10,000 words, I was like, what am I even doing? Where are they going? How is this going to end? Versus when I knew how the book was going to end, because I went back and kind of plotted out my story. When I figured out where my characters were going to end up, it was a lot easier to get them there because I knew where we were headed and what changes had to be made to my characters to get them to that point. Now, let me just say, plotting does not work for everyone. So if you're someone who cannot plot because it's boring or it takes too long, you are not alone. But sometimes having an understanding of how this kind of structure works can really help ease the anxiety of writing the story, because you have an idea of what's going on and you definitely don't need to be as detailed as, someone who is strictly a plotter. I've also put tons of links down in the description below that will help you with character building questions, world building questions, the 3-act structure, all of those things. So if you want some more detailed information, you can definitely check those out. I hope this video gave you a little bit better of an understanding of the structure of plots and worlds and characters, and maybe helps you get inspired to start writing your story for November and prepping with me along the way. As always, thank you so much for watching. Happy writing, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.